proved independently by Koenig and Agarwal in the same year. So that's why I just follow Bondi and Murthy for naming mostly. Okay, good. All right. So good morning, everyone. We proved the Koenig-Agarwal theorem yesterday, right? Which says that the size of a maximum matching is the same as the size of a minimum vertex cover in bipartite graphs, right? And that settles the decision problem. If you want to decide whether a given matching is maximum, that's both in NP and co-NP for bipartite graphs. In fact, it's polynomial time solvable using the algorithm idea of M alternating trees. You can construct an algorithm. Okay. So, are there any questions or concerns pertaining to all of this stuff? Right. So, we have covered. We started with Berger's theorem. We covered Hall's theorem, and then finally we looked at the Koenig-Agarwal theorem. All right, so now I want to switch to applications of bipartite matchings to edge colorings, right? And as I said, we are going to look at edge colorings as a part of the same module because edge colorings is basically the same as matchings, right? Each color class is simply a matching. Okay. So rather than writing down all the definitions again, let's go to a previous lecture where we discussed edge colorings and matchings in connection to Tate's theorem, right? Just to remind you of the definition. So an edge coloring of the graph is an assignment of k colors to the edges. That would be a k edge coloring. And it is proper if no two adjacent edges receive the same color. Which means you look at any vertex and you should see each color at most once around that vertex. And a graph is k-edge colorable if it admits a proper k-edge coloring. Okay? And each color class corresponds to a matching. Right? All right. So that's all the definitions we need, which we have already seen before. So now let's go to our new page. All right. So as usual, the edge chromatic number of a graph, right, we'll denote it as chi prime of G. You can see that most of the edge related parameters we are using a prime on the corresponding vertex related parameter. So that is the minimum number, uh, the minimum k for which the graph G admits, or maybe let me just say it is k edge colorable. Right? In other words, it is a minimum number of colors required to get a proper k edge coloring, proper edge coloring of the graph. Um,
So for bipartite graphs, each chromatic number is exactly maximum degree, right?
we will come to that. Yeah. So
Okay.
let's discuss the bounds and stuff, right? But another thing you can already probably see, and I think Ananya mentioned it in a previous lecture, is that the edge chromatic number of a graph is simply the chromatic number of its line graph. Okay. So that's a simple do-it-yourself exercise. Okay. And so let's talk about lower bounds and upper bounds. So clearly, what if you have a vertex of degree d, then you will need at least d colors at this vertex, right? Because each edge must get a different color. And so you can choose the vertex of maximum degree, and you get an immediate lower bound that the edge chromatic number is at least the degree of the graph. So this is a lower bound for the edge chromatic number. Right. The more interesting question is upper bounds. Right.
So I
So
think it is delta plus 1 upper bound.
right, right. So we will actually see Wissing's theorem. So maybe let me just put it here.
It is called Wissing-Gupta theorem because two guys proved it.
Yeah, so Wissing actually proved it in 64 and Gupta proved it in 66 independently. So typically it is called Wissing's theorem because in this particular case, Wissing was clearly the first one to prove it. But yeah, it's a matter of choice. So it seems that Gupta proved the same result 2 years later. And back in the day, of course, things were not as well connected as they are today. So for any graph G, the edge chromatic number is upper bounded by exactly one more than the maximum degree. Okay, we will prove this later, not today. Okay, good. What we may prove today is the bipartite case of this, in which case you actually have exactly delta G. So this is theorem 17.2 for a bipartite graph G. Also, I think I should be very clear here. Wissing's theorem is for simple graphs. It does not even apply to a graph with multiple edges. Now we'll see an example. Okay. For a bipartite graph, however, these two quantities are exactly the same. Okay.
So basically means I do not know means so is the idea of the proof something like so if we take any bipartite graph G and suppose its maximum vertex degree is delta. So if every vertex degree is delta, then means so if the degree of every vertex is delta, then the graph is delta regular.
Okay.
But if it is not so, then means any such bipartite graph can be extended to a delta regular graph by keeping the number of vertices fixed and only adding additional edges, extra edges. So and there is a result which says that every k regular bipartite graph is kh colorable.
Right. We did that yesterday. Right.
Yes. So if we can indeed show that any bipartite graph with maximum degree delta can be extended to delta regular graph, then we can color that graph edges, color its edges using delta colors,
Right. Right.
and these
Yeah.
delta colors are necessary for the original graph because
Right.
it is subgraph.
So that is one way to prove it. If I'm not mistaken, what you are saying is actually one way to prove it. So just to get everybody on board, let's go to yesterday's lecture, right? So yesterday we observed, this was not even this part, this was the previous page. Right. So we observed that a k-regular bipartite graph is actually kh colorable. So we have already proved theorem 17.2 for regular bipartite graphs, right? The problem is when your graph is not regular. So what Ananya is suggesting is if you have a graph that is not regular, it is a bipartite graph, you can construct a super graph of this graph by adding more vertices and edges and turn it into a regular graph so that the maximum degree remains the same, right? So if your
I
maximum
think
degree,
vertices is not sufficient. Means vertices is not necessary. You can add only edges and make it delta regular.
sure. I'm not going into details right now because I don't know this proof, right? But the idea is to take a super graph. So what you can do is you can take a super graph of the graph and turn it into a regular graph. I think you will have to add vertices, Aranya, because if your graph is, supposing you have three black vertices and five white vertices, you cannot turn this into a regular graph unless you add more vertices.
Yeah, means if the both parts have unequal number of
Right,
vertices, then we have to
exactly,
add.
right. So in the
Yeah, yeah,
general case, you have to allow addition of vertices as well. Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, of course.
So I think this might be a possible way to do it. This is not the proof we are going to cover. So you can turn it into a regular graph, keeping the maximum degree the same. Now, because it is a super graph, you take an edge coloring of this using this consequence that we discussed. And now you get a k edge coloring of the original graph by restricting it to the original graph. So that is one way to do it. However, that is not the way we are going to take in the lectures. I might put that on your assignment 5 if I have space to do that. Okay.
But if the both parts have equal number of vertices, then we don't need to add vertices. We simply need to
That
add
that I
only the
think
edges.
is true. That I think is true. If both parts have equal number of vertices, we don't need to add vertices.
Yeah. Otherwise, we have to add.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So we will prove this in some time. Okay. So both these theorems, this is 17.4. The proofs we are going to see are going to be simple applications of bipartite matchings. Actually, the 17.4 is not so simple, but it is still an application of bipartite matchings. Okay, so we will prove them using bipartite matchings.
So you will do the proof of Bising's theorem using bipartite matching, right?
That's right. Right.
But I think
Although
there is
it's
another
yeah.
proof of Bising's theorem that is purely
Oh,
graph theoretic.
well, we will also be seeing the purely graph theoretical proof. I think there are at least 4 to 5 different proofs of Ising's theorem. But yeah, I think I did not know of the proof we are going to cover during my PhD. So I did not know that you could do it just using bipartite matchings. But there are definitely another 2, 3 proofs of Ising's theorem.
Means I know a proof which is fairly complicated.
Okay, okay. So you can maybe you can post it on Piazza or we give a reference on Piazza. If there is a nice exposition, not if it is just complicated, but if there is a nice place where it is explained, that would be really
Means
cool.
no, means actually I did not read the proof from a book, but actually I did a course in graph theory previously in my institute in my ECMI. So there, I mean, who there the instructor taught us a proof of Bising's theorem, but it was not using bipartite matchings. It was fairly graph theoretic, and the proof was a bit
Yeah,
complicated.
but using
Yeah,
bipartite matchings doesn't make it less graph theoretical.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bipartite matching is graph theory,
Yeah.
right? So,
Actually, he took 2 lectures to prove this result.
yeah, you
Bising's
might also
theorem.
need to. Yeah, let's see. Okay. Anyway, so that's those are the 2 results we'll be proving in edge colorings as applications of bipartite matchings. Okay. Good. What I want to discuss now is let's look at Wissing's theorem, right? So although we haven't proved it, I want to discuss some cool consequences of it, right? So what do we know? We know that the edge chromatic number of a graph is lower bounded by the maximum degree. So this is for simple graphs. So the remaining discussion is all about simple graphs. Okay, for now. And we know that it is upper bounded by the maximum degree plus 1. Right? So clearly, there are just 2 possibilities. Either the edge chromatic number is exactly the maximum degree, or it is exactly the maximum degree plus 1. Right? And it turns out that deciding whether it is one or the other is an NP complete problem. Okay? So
So,
deciding,
so basically,
yeah,
is there a characterization of all those graphs for which chi dash g exactly equal delta of g?
right, that's exactly what I want to discuss. So deciding whether this is equal to delta of g or whether it is equal to delta of g plus 1 is an NP-complete problem. One of my favorite NP-complete problems, right? You know that it is one of two values, but you cannot decide which one it is, right? And of course, another question that, I mean, another thing that you can do at this point is you can classify all simple graphs into two classes, right? So the graphs for which it is equal to delta G, we can call them class 1 graphs, and the graph for which it is delta G plus 1, we can call them class 2 graphs. These are actually standard terminology. So for the lack of better names, people just call them class 1 and class 2 graphs. Okay, so you have a dichotomy for all the simple graphs. Either they are class 1 or they are class 2. Right? You get a bipartition of the graphs. And what Ananya is asking is there a characterization? So basically, I mean, deciding whether a graph is class 1 or class 2 is NP complete, right? So you don't expect any good characterization. Any characterization which would basically lead you to a polynomial time algorithm for the decision problem. Right? The best you can hope for is either necessary conditions or sufficient conditions. So, are there some necessary or sufficient conditions for a simple graph to be in class 1 or in class 2? Right? So we'll discuss mostly class 1. Class 2's necessary, sufficient or sufficient conditions are a bit complicated, but you can look them up in Bondi Murthy and in other sources. Right?
So basically, essentially, class 1 and class 2 graphs is a partition of all simple graphs.
Right. Exactly. So, based on the discussion we have had so far, theorem 17.2 tells you that all bipartite graphs are class 1 graphs. Right? So, all bipartite graphs are class 1. Right? There is another case that we have discussed before. Can anybody remember that? Have we seen another class of graphs that is a rich class that is also part of class 1?
Even cycles.
Even cycles. But that's not really rich, right? It's just the even cycles. I want a
Oh,
richer
that's
class.
bipartite only, yeah.
Yeah, that is already covered in bipartite. That's another point. I want a richer class of graphs that is not a subset of the bipartite graphs. You can use the four color theorem. You can assume the four color theorem is true because it is true. So I want you to use the four color theorem and think of a class of graphs that we have already discussed. And these are class 1.
Planar.
Planar, planar, but which ones?
One second.
All planar graphs are not class 1. If I'm not mistaken, you can actually find planar graphs that are not in class 1. But there is a class of planar graphs that we have already discussed, and they are in class 1.
Three connected planar graphs.
3 connected planar. You need one more condition.
Yeah, means graph must be simple. Simple three connected
No,
planar.
simple is also not enough.
Cubical.
Cubic. You are using four color theorem and Tate's theorem. So we have seen that the Tate's theorem says that proving the four color conjecture, which is now a theorem, is equivalent to showing that three connected cubic planar graphs are three-edge colorable, right? And three-edge coloring is exactly, it implies that the graph is in class 1.
Yeah, exactly. Because big delta is exactly 3.
Exactly. Okay. So
Because
three
it's cubic
connected
graph.
cubic planar graphs, they are three-edge colorable because of the four-color theorem, right? Because that is equivalent to proving this. And so these graphs are class 1. Okay. It turns out that you can actually weaken this condition. You don't actually need three connected. You can actually weaken three connected to two edge connected. So, in fact, you may replace three connected by two edge connected. Of course, it requires a proof, but you can try that on your own. I'll put it as a try it yourself. Okay, so you assume that three connected ones are in class 1, and using that, you try to prove that three connectivity is not really required. Two edge connected is actually sufficient.
Sir, why are you saying 2H connected, not only simply 2 connected?
Right, that is a good point because in the case of cubic graphs, you have already proved in an assignment that two edge connected and two connected is the same, right? You showed that edge connectivity is equal to vertex connectivity. So you're right. I prefer to say two edge connected because I am more used to edge connectivity than vertex connectivity in certain contexts. Right? But in the case of cubic graphs, they're actually the same. Okay. Um, so why can't you say for all cubic planar graphs? You might remember we saw a graph yesterday, right? We saw this graph which does not have a perfect matching. So if it does not have a perfect matching, then how can it be three edge colorable? Right? Because if it was three edge colorable, it would mean that you have three disjoint perfect matchings, red, blue, and green. But this graph does not even have a perfect matching, as we discussed yesterday. So this graph is definitely not three edge colorable. Right? So you need some connectivity condition, and two edge connected suffices. This graph is not two edge connected because it has cut edges. Right? Okay. So we have two classes. One is the bipartite graphs. Another is all two edge connected or two connected cubic graphs or cubic planar graphs. Okay. So let me ask you a question. What is the smallest two connected cubic graph that is not three edge colorable? Right? Of course, if it is planar, it would be three edge colorable. So that is why I have thrown away the planar condition. Any guesses? The smallest two connected cubic graph that is not three edge colorable. I'll give you a hint. It's a famous graph. Anyone? You can name the most famous graph you know.
Peterson.
Right. So it is actually the Peterson graph.
Is Peterson the smallest one?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you impose the connectivity condition, then it is the smallest. Yeah. Okay. So actually, I want to discuss a bit more about cubic graphs because that itself is a very interesting case. Most of this is discussion. I don't know if we'll see any proofs today. Let's see. I'm hoping we can see a proof of theorem 17.2, but I'm not too sure right now. Okay. Let's just look at cubic simple graphs. Okay. Um, right. In fact, let me impose another condition. Let me look at cubic two connected simple graphs. Okay. So for these graphs, you know that the chromatic number, the edge chromatic number, is either 3 or it is 4. Right? These are the class 1 graphs and these are the class 2 graphs. And already for this special case, the decision problem is NP complete. Deciding whether such a graph, by such graph I mean cubic two connected simple graph, is 3 edge colorable is NP complete. This was proved by actually the more general result I told you. This was proved by two researchers independently or two groups. One was Hollier in 81 and another was Levin and Galil. They proved it in 1983. Okay, generally called Hollier's result. Okay, so even in the case of 3, this is actually an NP complete problem. And if I'm not mistaken, Hollier proved for the special case as well. So in fact, if you prove it for this, then it implies for all graphs. Already in the 3 case, it is already in the cubic case, it is an NP complete problem. So it turns out that these graphs are really important in graph theory. For a lot of problems in graph theory, it turns out that this is the most difficult case. If you solve the problem for this case, you can actually solve the problem for all graphs. And these graphs have a special name. They are called snarks. This is um, this is motivated by Alice in Wonderland, where there is a poem called The Hunting of the Snark, which is an elusive creature. And in the same sense, snarks are particularly elusive graphs. So, in fact, for a long time, some people even suspected that there might be just a finite number of snarks, but now we know that there is infinitely many snarks. And in fact, we don't know of any good characterization of snarks. You kind of don't expect one because of Hollier's theorem, right? And the smallest snark is the Peterson graph, right? So it is the smallest two connected cubic simple graph that actually requires 4 colors to color the edges. In other words, it does not have 3 disjoint perfect matchings, right? So for several problems in graph theory, and I'll give you at least 1 or 2 examples. Um, the most difficult case is the case of snarks. In fact, for many problems, one may even reduce them to snarks. For many problems, there exist reductions to snarks. What I mean is, solving the problem for snarks will solve it for all graphs. That's what I mean by reduction. Okay? One such example is the cycle double cover conjecture. Right? Just to remind you of the conjecture, it says that if you take any non-separable graph, you can find a set of cycles that will cover each edge exactly twice. So every edge will appear in exactly two of your cycles. Okay, and it is important to note that you're allowed to repeat the same cycle in your set. Okay, so this is something we discussed in module 1. So if you don't recall, please revisit module 1. Right? And it turns out that the cycle double cover conjecture, it suffices to prove for snarks. Well, I think it is in Bondimurti over a span of several exercises. Okay. That's one example. Another example is the four color conjecture itself, right? If you think about, if you go back to Tate's theorem says that proving the four color conjecture back then is equivalent to proving that three connected cubic planar graphs are all in class 1, right? That means that if you have any snark, it cannot be planar. So another way of looking at the four color conjecture is to just show that every snark is non-planar, right? So this is actually equivalent to the four color conjecture. Four color conjecture, which is now a theorem, is to show that snarks are non-planar. In other words, there does not exist any planar snark. Right? If you just prove this, then you will have proved the four color theorem. Okay? So there is a bunch of different results in graph theory and conjectures that you can phrase completely in terms of snarks. Okay? Um, so in fact, let me put some other things that I wanted to mention. So Isaacs in 1975 constructed infinite families of snarks. So until that point, researchers did not know how to get infinitely many snarks. They knew some snarks, one on 10 vertices, one maybe on 18 vertices or 20, whatever, right? But they did not know any way of constructing snarks like an infinite family. So
Also,
Isaacs was the first one to do that. Yeah, is there a
so
question?
yeah, I have to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So snarks are cubic, right?
Right, right, by definition.
Yeah, and so the snarks are non-planar too.
Right,
So we saw that non-planar graphs have a subgraph which is a subdivision of K5 or K33, right?
right.
It can't be a subdivision of K5, right?
Right, it can't be a subdivision of K5. They have to be subdivisions of K3.
Subdivision of K3.
That's right.
Okay, that's what I want. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because it is a cubic graph, you don't have any vertex of degree 4 or more, so you cannot actually have a subdivision of K5. So all snarks will have a subdivision of K33.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Um, all right. Let's see. Okay. There is one final thing I want to say. Let's see. So I said that this is the definition of snarks, right? They are cubic two connected graphs, which require two connected simple graphs, which require four colors to color the edges. Now that is fine. That is actually the definition used in some papers. However, generally you can make them even more, you can make a even smaller class of graphs, because whatever I said for this class applies to a more specialized class of graphs. So typically for snarks, there is an additional condition that one can impose. It's like a connectivity condition. Um, most definitions of snarks impose an additional connectivity condition. So let me try to explain to you what this means. Okay, because if your conjecture, let's say the cycle double cover conjecture, is true for this smaller class of snarks, then it turns out that it is true for all snarks as I defined earlier. Okay, so what is that condition? Let me just give you an example. Take the Peterson graph. And now what you can do is you can replace a vertex by a triangle. It turns out if you do this, you get another snark as per the previous definition, right? What's the problem? This is not really very interesting. All you have done is you have replaced a vertex by a triangle. Okay, so it turns out, in fact, you can do something more general. You can look at these three edges. And what is this? This is a three cut. This is a three cut that is non-trivial. What do I mean by non-trivial? We have seen trivial cuts before. In a trivial cut, one of the two sides will have a single vertex. Of course, in a cubic graph, if you look at any vertex, you will have three edges, so you will get trivial three cuts. But what you can do is you can say that my graph should not have any non-trivial three cuts. All the three cuts should basically be trivial. Okay? So in a non-trivial cut, you will have at least two vertices on both sides. Right? This is a non-trivial cut. So a cubic graph, um, a simple two connected cubic graph is called essentially four edge connected. So this is a different notion of connectivity. It is like edge connectivity, but a slightly, let's say, weaker version of edge connectivity, right? Because of course a cubic graph cannot be four edge connected because you have these trivial three cuts. But what you can say is that maybe all the three cuts have to be trivial. In that case, we'll say that the graph is essentially four edge connected. If all three cuts are trivial cuts. Okay? So this graph is not essentially four edge connected. Because you have a non-trivial three cut. Okay? So typically one the standard definition of snarks these days, just to be very precise, you have a cubic graph that is simple and essentially 4-edge connected. Okay, uh, such that the edge chromatic number is exactly equal to 4. Okay, so this is the, let's say, the modern day definition of snarks, because eventually people realized that if you have these 3 cuts, then you can reduce the problem to these smaller graphs, which will be essentially 4-edge connected. Okay, so everything I said before is actually true for this modern definition of snarks, where you add the condition that they are essentially 4-edge connected. Right? So for the cycle double cover conjecture, you just need to prove it for these snarks. And if you prove it for these, then if you prove it for all snarks as defined above, and then you prove it for all graphs. Okay? Are there any questions or concerns regarding all of this discussion? So there are actually a lot of open problems in graph theory that are related to snarks. Okay, I'm just telling you about the cycle double cover conjecture because we have discussed it before, and of course the 4-color conjecture is, as we discussed, the same as showing that all snarks are non-planar. Okay? If you're interested in more such conjectures, I recommend you to read chapter 18. Is it 18? I think it's 18 of Bondi Murthy. It is about flows in graphs. It is not the network flows that you may have seen in other courses. There are other kinds of flows. They are related to group theory. So they are called group flows in graph theory. Right? So they are different from the network flows that you might have seen in other courses. Okay, so there are lots of interesting conjectures, and a good number of those conjectures you can reduce them to snarks. Okay. All right. I want to mention one last conjecture that has been proved, but the proof has only been announced. It has not been published. We have 5 minutes, so I don't think there's any point in trying to prove a theorem. So remember that the Peterson graph is the smallest snark. Also, the Peterson graph, you can check, is essentially 4-edge connected. You cannot find any non-trivial 3 cuts in the Peterson graph. Okay. So, right. So Peterson graph is the smallest snark. Motivated by this observation and perhaps a lot of intuition, Tutt in 1966 conjectured that every snark contains the Peterson graph as a minor. And of course, containing Peterson as a minor is actually the same as containing Peterson as a subdivision because it is a cubic graph. So let me state that. This is a conjecture of Tutt from 1966. I'll put it in double quotes and explain why. So this is related to the question someone asked earlier. Maybe it was Krishnan, I'm not sure. Every snark contains the Peterson graph as a minor, or therefore this is equivalent to as a subdivision, right? Because the Peterson graph is, because Peterson, the maximum degree is 3. Okay. And of course, if you prove this, then it implies that every snark is non-planar because the Peterson graph is non-planar. So this is clearly stronger than the four-color theorem. However, the four-color theorem does not imply this result. Okay, so this is stronger than the four-color theorem. Okay, every snark, not snarks. So this actually, a proof of this has been announced in 1997 by the same authors who proved the four-color theorem in 1996. So Robertson, Sanders, Seymour, and Thomas. And I think the proof was just next year, 1997. They have announced a proof. So of course, this proof is more complicated than their proof of the four-color theorem. However, to the best of my knowledge, this is not yet published. Don't ask me why, but it's not yet published. Okay, which is why I put it in double quotes. You can consider it to be a theorem, you cannot, it's up to you. Okay, so this is a stronger version, stronger conjecture than the four-color theorem. Okay. All right. So that's, yeah. Any questions, Krishna?
Has it been accepted as a proof though?
It depends on whom you ask. If you ask me, I am undecided. It's not published, so it is not refereed thoroughly, I guess. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I would say until it's published, you can put a question mark on it. But anyways, they are the same people who proved the four-color theorem, so it's very likely that the proof is correct. But until it is published, you are very well free to not believe it. All right. Anyway, so that's all I wanted to tell you about snarks. They are a very beautiful class of graphs. If you want to read more about snarks, there is a lot of sources out there. Bondi Murthy also has some constructions of snarks in different chapters. So you can take a look at that. But yeah, I just wanted to tell you about it because it's a really important class of graphs that captures the difficulty of many open problems in graph theory, right? And yeah, probably this is also my favorite NP complete problem because it's just a cubic graph. You know, it's 3-edge colorable or 4-edge colorable, but you just can't decide. So in the next lecture tomorrow, we will prove that all bipartite graphs are class 1. So that's what we'll prove tomorrow. And I think we will have enough time to get started on the proof of Wissing's theorem, but I don't think we will be able to finish it. So we will finish it on Monday, right? And I'll try to stop at a point where you can think about it yourself and try to complete the proof yourself. Okay, so let me just say proof tomorrow plus Monday. Okay, so that's all for today. If there are any questions or concerns, please ask me. So I think the name snarks was given by Descartes. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. In 1948. And it's inspired by um, Alice in Wonderland. Okay, so I'll stop recording now, but I'm still here in case any questions or concerns.